All right, hello everyone. My name is Angela Trusty, and I write the Ask Angela column. I am excited to be doing this Facebook Live thing. I've never done this before, but what I've been reading about is that you can either join now or you can watch it later at your own convenience. So, one of the things I wanted to give us an opportunity to talk about is this most recent article that came out yesterday. So, the title of it was something like, it's 2017 and I want to be going back to church. It looks like we have someone who just joined us. I can't see your names, but welcome for whoever just joined. Thinking about this particular column, I would say that the question that I get the most, I've been doing this column now for about 4 to 5 years, and the question I get the most is from people who they want to be able to come back to church. I would say the next question is, how do I get XYZ boy or XYZ girl to marry me? But otherwise, there's this question of, I've been out of church for a while, and how do I get myself back into it? This particular question, it talked about that. It's talking about this person who, I actually don't know if it was a he or she. I can't remember, but this person was talking about, I want to be able to go back to church. I've been out of going to church for a while and I want to get back into it. Whenever I read these questions, I do have the thought of, I don't know all the circumstances surrounding it. Is this, what is the reason that you want to go back to church? Or, why did you stop going in the first place? And I think whenever a person is thinking about how they really want to start something, whether it's around the new time of year or whether they just want to improve themselves, it's important to think about, well, why do I want to make this change in my life? I think once we understand the why, that helps us to be more effective. That's just something I'll say as a disclaimer, or really just as a preamble to the advice that I gave in this particular column. But what I thought about as I thought about this question, I thought, well, hey, if you don't know all the thoughts around why a person stopped going to church, or what the circumstances are in their lives, there are truly some practical things that that anyone can do to help them start a new habit and help them to be effective in it. The first thing I would say is making that thing social. So if you are wanting to go back to church, or maybe you're wanting to go back to the gym, or whatever your thing is, making it a social experience, that's something that helps you get someone who is on your team and helping you to do it. Hi, we've just had someone else join. Welcome. Again, I wish I could see the names of who's here, but welcome. Glad to have you with us. So thinking about how you can make something social, there's an aspect of when things are social, it can make it more fun, and it can also build some accountability into your experience. I know I found that with church. I think anyone, I would guess that maybe everyone's had an experience with the gospel where going to church can be a difficult thing, where they feel like, oh man, I'm just gonna miss this Sunday. I'm kind of tired today, or oh, I don't feel like I have friends here, so I don't necessarily want to go by myself, especially if you're single, or even if you're not single, if you're just the only one in your family who goes to church. It can really be a hard thing to do. So finding some way to make it social, finding someone who will go with you. I had an experience when I was living in Utah. I now live in Northern Virginia, but when I was living in Utah, I had this experience where I felt kind of like I don't know anyone at church. I don't want to go by myself. And I had a very good friend at work who's a colleague. I had her come with me. And so was not a member of the church at all, but she was my friend. And so she was willing to come with me, and it was a great social experience. I was able to meet some new people. She was a little more outgoing than I am. So yeah, so that's something that you can do. You can make it social. The other thing I talked about in the article that I feel really strongly about is this idea of committing to small steps. So this particular person who wrote into my column, he or she said that they didn't feel like they could make this commitment for all of 2017. They wanted to be in a place where at the end of the year, they could feel that sense of achievement, like, yes, I've been going to church, I'm a faithful member, and kind of have that positive spiritual feeling that comes from doing what you feel you should do. And I think that is a tremendous goal, to want to see yourself in that place. I also think it can be overwhelming. Welcome to whoever just joined. Welcome. I also think it can be overwhelming when you feel like, hey, I'm trying to make a goal for all of 2017. Oh, this is actually my little sister who's just joined. Welcome, Elizabeth. But yeah, so this it can be overwhelming when you try to make a goal one day for all of 2017, or when you try to make a goal that you're going to completely change. But one of the things that I have found to be a positive thing in my life is when you make a small goal. So instead of saying I'm going to go to church for all of 2017, you say I'm going to go to church today, or I'm going to go to church next week. I'm going to go there for 1 hour. And you keep making that choice, because number one, you start to build this habit when you have to keep on making that choice, and number two, you don't overwhelm yourself, and you're able to focus in and zero in on what your goals are. So I would encourage anyone who might be in the position of this particular reader. Hi, welcome, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you too. And I would say anyone who's in this position, if you're trying to get back into church, if you're trying to get back into something that you feel is positive for yourself, think about how you could break that down into one small thing that you know you can do. As I said before, make it social. Invite someone to participate in that with you. So that's wonderful. So I see Elizabeth has asked, said, Mom was wondering about making larger goals. Elizabeth, expound on that. Would love to know what you mean by these larger goals, or what your thoughts are around that. And also to anyone who's joined, would love for you to share a comment of where you are joining from today. I know that we've got readers kind of all over the place, so would love to know where you guys are joining from today. So talking about this article, number one, I talked about making it social. Whatever as you're trying to get back to church, how can you make this a social experience for yourselves? It builds in accountability, and it also just has someone there who's looking out for you. And then I talked about how you can, instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to go to church all of 2017, or I'm going to make this huge change that's going to span, for this long period of time, you can break it down into smaller chunks. Something I said in the article is that church helps us to build commitment. So this particular reader who wrote in said that there was some anxiety around, making commitment for an entire year. He or she didn't feel like that they had the capacity to do that. But as you break it down into the smaller goals, you just ask yourself the question, well, could I just do it one day? Do I have the capacity to do it once? Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing this, Elizabeth. So we have a thought around, how to feel like you're making progress when you've got a long-term goal. And I really love that question. I think that that supports the idea of having these shorter term goals. Sometimes when you've got a really long-term goal, like, hey, I want to get married in the temple, or I want to I want to go to church for all of 2017, or I want to be a very strong disciple of Christ. These are lifelong pursuits. And so I think when we can make them into smaller pieces, we can start to feel some movement more effectively. There's some psychology behind that. I'm not like a professional person when it comes to psychology, so I don't know, but there is some psychology behind the idea that people need to feel progress. In fact, people are encouraged when they are at work, every time they finish an assignment, to take maybe a 3-second or 5-second beat where you just think about the work that you've done, the work that you were able to accomplish, because there's a feeling that comes over you that then propels you forward, that feeling of success of, yes, I have completed something. You feel that, and it helps you to propel yourself a little bit further. So I just want to recap what we're talking about. We're talking about, as we're trying to make changes in our lives, it's 2017. Happy New Year to everyone who's joined right now. As we're trying to make changes in our lives, number one, we can make it social. Number two, we can bring it down into small chunks. And then Elizabeth brought up here this idea of how do we feel progress on these larger goals. And I think, again, breaking them down helps us to experience some movement on them. Another point that I want to talk about that came up, or that was included in this article, is this idea of prayer. There was this quote that I actually read from one of the leaders of the church, Elder Todd Christofferson. I'm going to actually just read this directly from my computer here. He says, We do not need to achieve some minimum level or capacity or goodness before God will help. Divine aid can be ours every hour of every day, no matter where we are in the path of obedience. And I wanted to share that quote because I thought it was really impactful for, well, my own life, but also anyone who feels like they're in a place where they want to change and they want divine help. Sometimes we might feel like, well, let me, go to church for 5 months before I ask for help, or I can't pray right now because I haven't been living well. Or God will not help me because I've kind of turned my back on him. I know that's a feeling that I've had before. But I love the truth of this quotation where, it talks about how almost as soon as we feel like, hey, I want to change my life, because that is such a powerful thing. And in that moment, we're taking the step towards giving our will over to God, that he's willing to help us. So I think more important than anything I've said, in terms of making it social, cutting the pieces down into small goals, is being willing to ask for divine help and having the trust that you'll get that divine help. I think that that is something that can help us with whatever we are doing, whether it is church, whether it is trying to improve our family relationships, whatever the thing is. So I feel really strongly about that. And I hope that, yeah, I hope that that's something that some of you have experienced as well. So I want to pause here and see if there are any questions about what we have been talking about so far. Any questions or comments pertaining to this idea of how do I get myself back to church? Maybe some of you have experienced this where you've been out of church for some period of time, or where maybe and you were able to get yourself back, or maybe you've just been in church and you've had some thoughts around, hey, I know how a person could do this. So if you've got any thoughts about how you would advise someone in this situation, how you would advise someone to get back into the swing of things at church, or how you would advise someone to make changes in their lives, go ahead and share those comments there. Also, welcome, Monica. Thanks so much for joining. Glad to see your name here. One of the other things I thought I'd share, just as you guys are thinking about that question being, how would you advise someone in this situation? If someone came to you and said, hey, I want to be active in church in 2017, how would you advise them? So as you think about that, one of the other things I wanted to share about is just how I actually get these questions. As I mentioned earlier on, I've been writing this column for about 5 years now. And what I typically do is I'll get an email to askangela.dn@gmail.com. Hello, Sister Freeman. I also just want to welcome one of my mission companions who trained me at the Temple Square Mission, has just joined. Welcome, glad to have you here. But yeah, as you guys are thinking about how you would advise someone if they're trying to get back to church, would love to hear your comments on that. I just would say that I get emails to askangela.dn@gmail.com. That's one I use specifically for Deseret News emails related to my column. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to submit them or to invite your friends to submit them. Okay, and so a comment here around how to get someone to come back, or how to help someone come back to church, someone who wants to do it. Some advice you might share. We've got just go. Don't analyze. Don't wait for certain feelings. Just go. Yeah, I really love that comment. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mom, by way of Elizabeth. I think that is fantastic. It's hard to not overthink things. I think sometimes we do want to feel like, well, okay, I feel like my faith is perfect. I feel like I've got the perfect outfit. I've got a whole bunch of friends. So now I'm ready to go to church. So really, really love that. Thanks for sharing that. And then welcome, Jennifer. Glad to have you joining us. Jennifer is also my sister, so I appreciate my sisters joining this. My sisters, biologically speaking, and also my sisters in the gospel. It's really exciting to have you guys on here. So we have been talking about this past week's article. The article is titled, How to Get Back, I Want to Go Back to Church in 2017. So this is someone who wrote in, and I'll actually just read the question again. It says, I make this resolution every year. I decide at the end of the year that I don't want to spend another year as a less active member of the church. I think about going back. I plan to go back. I buy a new outfit. We've all been there before. I tell my friends, and then Sunday comes, and for some reason, I think of some excuse not to go. I would love to end 2017 as an active member, but I don't think I'm ready to commit to being a faithful churchgoer. How do I reconcile who I am with who I want to be? And so some of the things we've talked about today already for people who are just joining is this idea of making it social, this idea of cutting it down into a small goal. We don't have to snap our fingers and be this perfect different person in a day. We also don't have to be someone who's ready to say, hey, I'm going to go to church for a whole year. We just go one Sunday and then we say that Sunday, okay, I'm going to go again the next Sunday. I think one of the biggest things I've experienced with going to church and then many times having the feeling like I don't want to go is this idea that, you know, when I'm out, if I'm not going, you know, I can start to forget the fact that I need to be there. And then when I do go, I realize, oh man, I was so in my head. Like we have Elizabeth who mentioned, yeah, don't go, don't overanalyze, just go. Sometimes when you're overanalyzing, you can convince yourself of these things that just aren't true about being at church. So I'm excited to be able to talk about this article with you guys. I think the next question that I'll put out to you is, what is the reason that you continue to go to church? You know, why do you go? For anyone who does go, or what do you do on Sundays that you feel is something that, hey, I want to make sure I always do that on Sundays because it makes me feel good. All right, so I'm going to read what Monica's written here. Thanks so much for sharing some thoughts, Monica. I think most people still have at least one person they trust. I think it may make it easier to have that friend come pick them up one Sunday, ensuring that there is someone with whom they can sit. Yeah, I love that comment. It's so funny how we're people and we don't want to be sitting someplace by ourselves. In my family jokes about how they're all introverted and I am extroverted, and that is not true. But they joke about that, and so you would think that it could be okay. You could just go and sit and make a whole bunch of friends all just quickly one Sunday. But it really doesn't happen like that. We want to have someone who can be our friend there, or who can walk with us from one class to another. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Monica. And you're laughing about that. Yeah, I think you think Monica knows my family and knows that, well, just knows my family. So that's wonderful. Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left today as we're talking about this article. Again, I just want to say that this really is a topic that I get a lot. How to get back into going to church. We have some great comments here about breaking it into smaller goals, making it social, and just relying on prayer as something to help you. That God is someone who wants to support you in whatever your goals are. If your goal is to go back to church, we talked about resolutions last night as a family, and there were some different things that were thrown around. Like I had one sister talk about how she wanted to make sure she was a better mother this year. Somebody else talked about how they wanted to go to the temple more. I think I talked about how, like, health was going to be something that was important to me. And so one of the things that I think is important to know about even this article that came out yesterday is that the tips are really universal. So if you're thinking about going back to church, if you're thinking about just starting any good habit, that we can use these principles to help us. I'm just going to read Elizabeth's comment here. I think we all have our personal iron rods and we have to hold on to them. For me, it's a desire to follow my parents' example, and I can't deny how the Spirit makes me feel. I love that so much, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for sharing that comment. Of course, the iron rod referring to the scriptures, but also our own personal iron rods. What are the things that help kind of keep us sturdy in this life as we are moving forward? Okay, I want to end with a quote. Let's see if I've got a quote to end our session with today. I'll share this one. This is actually another Elder Todd Christofferson quote. He's one of my favorite apostles. I feel like I read his talks all the time. But what he says is, true success in this life comes from consecrating our lives. That is, our time and our choices to God's purposes. In so doing, we permit him to raise us to our highest destiny. I think all of us can kind of feel the will of God sometimes. We can feel that great that just empowering feeling that is pushing us and leaning us towards doing something really good. I want to encourage you guys to follow that voice, and to use the principles we talked about. When you feel that voice encouraging you to do something, make that thing social, break it into small goals, and also pray for help to help you accomplish that. Thank you so much for joining. This was the first Ask Angela live Facebook session, and it was very scary, but I'm glad that you guys got to join, and I hope that you'll see me next week when we talk about the next article. Happy New Year, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.